Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into the sheer scale and strategy of Bhima's legendary Eastern campaign. We're going to track his march step by step, and let me tell you, the speed and magnitude of this conquest is absolutely staggering.
The source text introduces our central figure with some incredibly evocative language. It calls him that chastiser of all foes, that tiger among men. It's a powerful hook, right? It instantly establishes his dual nature. He's not just an intimidating warrior, he's an unyielding force of nature. When Bhima targets a kingdom, he brings the storm. He isn't just defeating his enemies, he's chastising them, asserting total dominant authority right from the jump.
Let's get right into Section 1. The epic march begins, looking at Bhima's first conquests.
And when I say begins, I mean it literally explodes out of the gate. Look at the sheer density of this timeline. Week 1, he vanquishes King Srenimat of Kumara. Immediately after that, Vrihadvala of Kosala falls. Then comes the mighty Dirghayaghna of Ayodhya, and right after, the subjugation of Gopalakaksha and the Mallas. It's essentially an ancient, highly calculated blitzkrieg. This rapid-fire succession of victories immediately solidified his unstoppable momentum. I mean, he barely gave these kings time to saddle their horses. Moving on to Section 2, Brute Force and Strategic Minds, where we see Bhima's dual approach. You know, it's really easy to look at that early timeline and just assume Bhima was a mindless brawler, relying entirely on muscle. But actually, he was a highly calculating general, building a massive empire. We can see this brilliant duality clearly. On one hand, you've got his famous terrible prowess, overcoming King Kratha and the Vatsabhumi region through sheer raw force. But at the exact same time, he's utilizing strategic policy to subjugate the Sarmakas, Varmakas, and Sakas. He knew exactly when to kick down the doors and when to sit down and negotiate. And a huge part of that strategic policy was his masterful use of conciliation. This is the art of winning over an opponent without shedding a drop of blood. A perfect example of this is how he handled the son of Jarasandha. By securing tribute through smart diplomacy rather than a devastating siege, Bhima could actively recruit these vanquished monarchs. So they end up marching alongside him, snowballing his military might as he heads toward his next targets. Talk about a win-win.
Which leads us to Section 3, expanding the empire and conquering new terrains.
So, with a massively swelled army, now made up of both his own forces and those of his defeated foes, Bhima pushes way out of familiar central lands. The text gives us this striking image. Arriving in the moist region at the foot of the Himalayas, the hero soon brought the whole country under his sway. This really highlights the staggering physical scale of the march. It proves his ambition knew absolutely no natural borders. Mountains, valleys, marshes, it simply didn't matter.
Just look at the sheer, systematic volume of his territorial conquests. He completely dominated the mountain rulers, folks like the 7 kings of the Kiratas living around the Indra mountain and the rulers of the Bhagawanta mountains. But he swept through the coastal and Mlechchha kings with that exact same efficiency, taking down rulers like Samudrasena and Tamirlipta. From the freezing northern altitudes down to the humid, marshy coastal plains, his army seamlessly adapted to everything.
Now for Section 4, the clash with Karna, an epic showdown.
Look, every historic military campaign has its ultimate hurdle, right? Its absolute peak of tension. And for Bhima's seemingly unstoppable forces, that big test was a bitter, legendary rival waiting on the battlefield. The text sets the stage for this climax with an incredibly visceral description. It says he was making the earth tremble by means of his troops consisting of the 4 kinds of forces. Just imagine the literal, earth-shaking scale of these vast armies colliding. This isn't just some minor border skirmish. This is a massive, high-stakes showdown.
And then, right in the middle of all this chaos, we get this stark, powerful sentence. The foremost of the Pandavas then encountered Karna, that slayer of foes. After moving at breakneck speed through this dense list of conquered kingdoms, the narrative demands a dramatic pause. All of our attention is focused right here. This is the crucial, deeply personal victory where Bhima finally engages and subjugates his fiercest opponent.
But defeating Karna wasn't just a victory, it was a violent catalyst. Let's see how this builds. Once the mighty Karna was subjugated, Bhima instantly pivoted. He vanquished the powerful king of the mountainous regions and then slew the king of Madagiri by pure strength in a fierce encounter. Basically, overcoming Karna triggered a devastating domino effect that completely shattered any remaining resistance in the region. The floodgates were open.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, a mountain of wealth, focusing on extracting tributes.
You see, an empire of this massive size doesn't just run on fear or new borders, it requires an unbelievable amount of capital to sustain. As Bhima exacted tributes from the coastal kings, he wasn't just collecting your standard taxes. He was extracting the absolute finest luxury goods. We're talking sandalwood, aloes, fine clothes, heavy blankets, gems, pearls, gold, silver, and valuable corals to fill a central treasury. This brilliantly illustrates the incredible diversity of wealth he was pulling in from the marshy regions of the seacoast.
But to truly grasp the scale of this economic conquest, we have to look at the raw numbers. The text explicitly states that the defeated kings showered him with a thick downpour of wealth, consisting of coins and gems counted by hundreds of millions. That is an almost unimaginable fortune. And honestly, not to mention a complete logistical nightmare trying to transport all that weight back home across ancient India.
So where does all this treasure actually end up? Well, the text tells us, returning to Indraprastha, Bhima of terrible prowess offered the whole of that wealth unto King Yudhisthira the Just. This is really the crux of the entire campaign. All of this unmatched military might, the clever diplomacy, and that mountain of gathered treasure, it was all ultimately harvested for one single purpose, to consolidate the absolute, unassailable authority of a single ruler. Which brings us to a final, pretty provocative thought. With hundreds of millions in wealth flowing into the treasury and an entire fractured continent brought to heel by the calculated strength of the wind god's son, how will King Yudhisthira wield this new, absolute power? It's a massive shift, one that changes the ancient world forever. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.